I welcome you all to NJ4S, the webinar series. Our theme this month is Disability Education webinar. I am Cheryl Tolentino, a supervising prevention consultant. And today's presentation is on time blindness and how this symptom affects a lot of individuals, and a lot of people don't recognize that this can be a disability. You know, disability that affects the way people function in their daily lives. So I would like to inform you that the presenter is our own Julia Krevis, who's a prevention consultant. And you can tell by this presentation that she is a fun and outgoing individual with a master's degree in public health. She received her degree from Montclair State University, where she played field hockey for the majority of her undergraduate and graduate experience. During her studies, she worked in health education, where she focused on the LGBTQ plus community, AIDS awareness, women's rights, and mental health. Once a troubled student herself, she recognized that a compassionate educator makes all the difference. The passion that her professors exhibited in this field of public health has inspired her to become a health educator herself to aid students in living the best life they can through prevention. Outside of the job, she's known for her creativity both in the workplace and in everyday life, but she also enjoys video games, working out, and doing nails. Hopefully she'll showcase them today at this presentation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Julia Krevis on our presentation on time blindness. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Cheryl. Thank you for that introduction. My nails are new too. I gotta keep going out. They're very funky today, or this set. So let me just share my screen for you guys. I'm excited to share this with you, as this is something that I personally have struggled with, especially growing up. Cheryl mentioned I was a troubled student at one time. I'm no longer a student, but time blindness was a really, really big issue for me, amongst other things. So I'm excited to talk about this. Let me make sure my audio is shared just in case. Yeah, okay. So has anyone heard of time blindness before we get into it? Has anyone ever heard of this or want to take a stab at what it might entail? See if I can get the chat up. Anybody want to unmute or chat? Okay. Maybe procrastination.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, wait, what did you ask?
If you've ever heard of time blindness or like what it might entail.
No.
You have not, honey. Okay.
No.
Cool. So we're gonna get into it then.
Julia, there's somebody commented on the. Oh, you already said it.
Yeah. So, you might, if you experience time blindness, you might say things like this. This took longer than expected, or maybe it's difficult for you to estimate your time, right? It might, you might have trouble estimating how long something will take or how short something might take. You might have trouble figuring out when you should start tasks or when to end tasks. And if you've experienced any of these things, you may experience time blindness. And it sounds a little scarier than it actually is. It really is just a term that describes the difficulty someone might have with perceiving time, and that can include managing time as well. Obviously, if you can't perceive time properly, then you can't manage it properly, right? So it's not really a symptom or really a diagnosis. It's more of like a condition, like a cognitive condition. And it often leads to challenges in punctuality, in planning, and in everyday tasks, especially when it comes to school or work, which are really, really important parts of our lives. And these challenges can significantly affect your daily life, and it can make you seem, irresponsible or maybe just unorganized, when that might not be the case. You might just need a little bit more help with perceiving your time and with managing your time, right? So before we really get into it, we're going to do a little activity. Everyone needs to see the screen, so if you can put it in gallery view, that will help you. So I'm going to put it, when I say so, I'm going to put a timer on for a minute, right? We're going to all close our eyes and raise your hands when you think a minute is over, right? So when you raise your hand, open your eyes too, and you can kind of see the differences in the way people perceive time, right? So don't cheat, don't count to 60, don't count, your seconds or anything. We're just gonna see how differently everyone perceives time. So let me just get a timer ready. There's people walking by. Let me get a timer out. 1 minute. Okay, is everyone ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so that's a minute. So I'll before I speak, how did you guys feel? What did you see when you opened your eye?
I was definitely
I was way
before
off.
the time. Yeah, I was off.
It's hard, right? I think the first person to raise her hand was Shakara. She raised her
Yeah, I
hand
was way
around
off.
40 seconds, 45 seconds. And then Cheryl was next. And I think Khadija and Bintu put their hands up next. So yeah, that just really, hold on, sorry, I'm trying to get you guys smaller. Give me a sec. That just really shows like how differently people perceive time, right? And how difficult it might be for certain people to perceive time. That was my first time doing that activity, so I hope it worked the way I wanted it, but I think it did. So let's move on. So what does time blindness look like? So it can look very different for depending on the person, right? And depending on what the person goes through. So it can really look like all these things. So poor time estimation. You might frequently underestimate or overestimate the time you need for certain activities. This I find for me is especially difficult when it comes to commuting. I always underestimate or overestimate my commute. So I either leave way too early and I'm there way too early, or I leave too late thinking that it won't take as long, or maybe I won't take traffic into consideration, right? Especially in New Jersey, there's a lot of traffic. So that is like a big one for time blindness, especially as you get older. Chronic lateness, that kind of goes along with that poor time estimation, right? So you might be late to appointments frequently, you might be late to meetings or social gatherings or work or school. That was a really big thing for me too. I'm speaking personally because I have experienced all these things. I think when I was in high school, I had like over 100 lates or something like that. So I had a lot of issues with that because I just couldn't seem to figure out when the right time to leave for school was, when the right time to wake up was, when the right time to start getting ready was. It was just always very difficult. This can also cause procrastination, right? So because you have this difficulty gauging on how long a task might take or when you should start a task, you might just not want to start it at all, right? So if I think a task is going to take 3 or 4 hours, I might put it off and put it off and put it off because I think it's going to take so long. But then when I actually do it, it only takes me like 45 minutes to an hour, right? So procrastination is a really big thing with this because of that lack of, awareness of time, right? So this can also be hard with transitioning, right? So transitioning from one activity to another, again, this is something I experience a lot, especially with work. So when I get home from work, it's difficult for me to gauge, okay, when should I eat dinner? When should I go to the gym? When should I start getting ready for bed, right? Which can, like I said, lead to procrastination, right? So shifting your focus or ending your focus to start another task can also be very difficult for people who experience time blindness. Feeling like time is moving too quickly, right? So you might experience this sensation that time passes so fast, especially if you get caught up in something that you enjoy doing or just caught up in something specifically, right? So think about playing video games or reading a book, watching a TV show. Oh, just one more episode, one more episode, one more episode. And even though you know the episode is 25 minutes long, it doesn't seem that way. It seems even shorter or even longer, right? So that can kind of lead to this time passing very quickly and leads to a lot of anxiety and stress, especially when something else is happening in the day, later in the day. Difficulty planning ahead. So all these things can kind of mesh together and affect the way that you plan things, right? So you might struggle to plan for the future. Like for certain events, right? So if I have an event coming on Friday, it might be difficult for me to envision or prepare that event until I get to that very day, which can really be hard because since time management is already so hard, if you really can't figure out how to plan for that day, then it can really cause a lot of issues and responsibility and stuff like that. And then, of course, impulsive decisions, right? This is kind of a common thing with neurodivergence in general. A lot of people with time blindness, too, can experience a lot of impulsive behaviors, right? So since time is kind of irrelevant, you kind of don't think about the decisions that you're making a lot. Maybe you don't consider the long-term consequences because the only thing you can focus on is right now. So that can be acting without planning, just getting up and all of a sudden being like, I'm going here now, and not having any planning with it, right? So some examples of some issues that might arise from issues with time blindness is missing appointments or deadlines, like I mentioned before, being late to work, being late to school. Missing appointments and deadlines is really big because there's a lot of forgetfulness that can come with time blindness as well, since you can only really focus on what's going on right now. Appointments and deadlines are kind of out of the picture. I kind of compare it to when you go like this to a baby, when you play peekaboo with a baby and they kind of don't know that you're behind there. It's the same thing. Whereas if something is ahead of the time, it might be difficult to envision it at all. So because of that, overcommitting can happen, right? You can either forget about things that you might have or not realize how little time you have in the day. So a friend of mine always says like, oh, Julia always wants to have her cake and eat it too, right? So I always want to plan so many things in such a little amount of time that it really isn't possible to hit all of those things because time seems so endless, Like I said, being late, even when you take action to be on time, right? Like, people with time blindness know that they're chronically late, and they do a lot of things that they can to try to avoid being late, but things end up always happening. A big thing that also comes up is this kind of like compulsivity to do everything you need to do. So, most people might say, oh, I'm running late to work, like I'm just gonna skip breakfast, like I'll just eat later. Whereas people with time blindness might be like, no, like I need to eat breakfast before I go or else this might happen, or things like that. So it can cause a lot of stress and issues, especially in adult life. So I have a little video here that explains time blindness a little bit more. I'm gonna take a look.
Just one more
You
chapter.
guys hear?
It's 9:55 at night, and you're ready for that important meeting tomorrow. You know that with a good night's sleep, you'll be fully prepared and a force to be reckoned with. You check the clock. 5 minutes later, it's already 1 a.m. How did time slip away so quickly? Well, for some people with ADHD, time can be a tricky thing. Scientists have even given it a name: time blindness. But what exactly is time blindness, and why does it happen to people with ADHD? Let's dive into the thinking behind it. A quick disclaimer: this video is for educational purposes only. If you're experiencing symptoms of ADHD, it's best to see a professional for a diagnosis. First, let's clarify. People with ADHD don't always see time like others do. Our brains can perceive time differently, and there are various ideas for why it happens. One idea is that our heart indicates to our brain the passing of time. Typically, our heartbeats help our brain to judge how much time has passed, as it knows, more or less, how many times our heart beats in a minute. But ADHD can disrupt these processes, making it harder to track time accurately. Another idea focuses on automatic attention. Imagine you're walking through a beautiful forest. You're completely absorbed in its beauty, and your brain is in automatic attention mode. It's like being on cruise control. You don't have to think about walking, listening, or breathing. Your brain takes care of these things effortlessly. People with ADHD often have strong automatic attention, which can lead to hyperfocus. Hyperfocus is like putting your head down and diving deep into a task, and the rest of the world is speeding up around you. Time blindness is not just about scheduling or estimating how long something will take. It can affect various aspects of our lives. Have you ever invited people over for a meal and started preparing it just 5 minutes before they arrived? That's time blindness in action. It's important to understand that time blindness is a real thing. People with ADHD struggle with time perception, completing tasks, or meeting deadlines. However, managing time effectively is not impossible. We can find ways to overcome time blindness and improve our time management skills. Here are a few strategies that might help. Work backward. Picture your future self successfully completing a project on time. Then, break down the steps needed to get there and assign a realistic timescale to each step. By planning ahead, you'll set yourself up for success. Create playlists. Instead of relying on timers, create playlists of your favorite music that run for different lengths. When you start a task, choose the playlist that suits the task's estimated duration. This way, you can focus on the work at hand rather than constantly checking the time. Include buffer time. When estimating how long something will take, add some extra time as a buffer. If a task will take 10 minutes, schedule it for 30. This way, you'll have some breathing space and feel more relaxed. Time blindness is a real challenge, but it doesn't have to control your life. By understanding how it affects you and implementing effective strategies, you can conquer it and make the most of your time. If you're uncertain that you do have an ADHD brain, check out our free test, which can be found in the link below. Our free test will give you a quick look at...
Okay, we're not here to diagnose anyone with ADHD, so we're gonna skip that. As she noted in the video, ADHD and ADD are very, very common cause of time blindness, right? I think it's probably the most common one, but there are definitely other things that can affect your perception on time, right? So autism spectrum disorder, of course, that can also be that, I always say that ADHD and autism are two sides of the same coin. They're not the same, but two sides of the same coin. So a lot of the symptoms of ADHD and autism can overlap. Neurological factors, right? So maybe an injury to the brain or even just an illness in general can definitely cause some time blindness. And then dopamine dysregulation. This is a really big one that I think we've seen in a lot of our presentations at NJ4S. Dopamine dysregulation is really huge these days because of these things, right? Our phones. When we're seeing these videos that are 7 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and you can just swipe right to the next one and have a completely different topic, completely different thing. The world is literally at your fingertips. It really causes these shots of dopamine up in your brain really quickly and back down, really quickly and back down, really quickly and back down. And when things like that happen and we get kind of attached to the swipe of Instagram or TikTok, really we can lose a lot of track of time because our dopamine in our brain is not working properly. So if you guys noticed in the last video at the end, she said it's important to note that time blindness is a real thing. And the reason she said that is because a lot of people, especially in the older generations, tend to think that time blindness is like an excuse for being lazy or for, not taking accountability or not being responsible. But so I'll show you this video that kind of showcases that.
You know what the best cure for time blindness is? A pink slip. Because I guarantee you they can see the pink slip. You have a job to do, so show up and do it. And I get all the reasons. People get in the flow state. They might have ADHD. There are a variety of things, but the bottom line is this. If you were paid to do your job, show up on time, get your projects done. I guarantee you leave on time. So if you're going to leave on time, you better show up on your time. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, Mariah, help us out with the devil's advocate here, because I think it's really easy to look at this and go, what on earth is this? Some psychologists say this is a real condition and even a potential symptom of ADD. Is there another side to this?
Absolutely. My gut reaction was similar. To me, from an etiquette perspective, being on time is one of the most simple forms of respect that you can perform. But how you get there may depend on the individual. I think that individuals should feel empowered to lean on their employers and be transparent and say, I have this issue, how can we work together? With that being said, I don't think that's an excuse for someone to waste someone else's time. Again, we should all be held to that standard of making sure we're respecting time and being on time, but how we get there may differ depending on the individual.
I see. I mean, Jason, does this speak to any larger dynamics about what workers are facing right now in this country? I mean, who among us has not been overloaded, especially after the pandemic, or felt like one has underestimated the amount of time a task will take?
You hit it right on the head. The pandemic changed everything. From an employer standpoint, they learned that they can actually get just as much work done by hiring fewer employees. The problem is when you hire fewer employees, that means that if you have 3 employees, they're doing the work of 10 people. When you have somebody who can't meet deadlines, who can't show up to work on time, it puts so much pressure on those folks who not only have to do the job of 10 people, now they're doing the job of 11 people because they're doing your job. Time blindness as a whole is, like, they've been talking about this stuff in some form or fashion for the better part of 30, 40 years, but it still comes back to one simple thing. It's not just about showing up, but it's about showing up for your coworkers and being there. You've got to do your job.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm Mariah Grummett and Jason Greer. We appreciate your time and perspective. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for watching.
Hey, what do you guys think about that? About what they said?
That was horrible. Hold on. Why would you hire 3 people to do the work of 10 people? Like, that does not sound like a good idea at all. And I would not want to work for an employer, whether I had time blindness or not. Right.
Now, that's another thing I think that, off topic, but maybe needs to come into perspective for some employers is that, what's the reason that this is happening, right? Like, is it time blindness or do they not want to go to work? Like, and for me, it felt like a little bit of a kick in the stomach, right? I don't like being late to things. Like, it doesn't make me feel good to be late to things. It doesn't make me feel good that I cannot physically get there on time, right? But, the woman on the left, I didn't catch her name. She actually had a good point. She said, you know what? It is the way that you get there, right? So for some people, they can just get up and be like, yeah, I'm on time every day and it works out for me and that's that. But for other people, it takes so much more, right? It's such a process trying to plan out their day and how they might get somewhere, when they might get somewhere, what they'll need to do before that. I know, like, if I have something that I need to do, in the end of the day, let's say 5 o'clock or whatever, and I'm not working, I have to literally plan my whole day around it, or else I won't get there. I literally won't get there on time. Any other thoughts on what they said? Check the chat. Khadija said I was early. I'm early. Okay, so hold on, I have like a pop-up here. Okay, so here are some comments. What is this? Sorry, my computer has a pop-up randomly out of nowhere. Okay, so here are some of the comments that were left on that video that was found on YouTube. This one says, it's called New Generation Makes Up Anything to Be Babied. This one over here says, LMAO, any excuse to not take accountability or be responsible. This one says, the madness must stop. Society needs to stop coming up with excuses to get out of doing anything challenging. The biggest problem is giving psychologists and psychiatrists too much respect. They come up with all these issues so they can get published. The person that is always late is usually the best worker. I think time blindness is a real thing that people deal with, so they need to make accommodations. What do you guys think about those comments? Anyone have any comments on those comments?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I do think everybody should be on time, but also a part of me does say that, you know, for the people that do come late, they do tend to do the most. Like, they do tend to be some good workers. But I'm not saying you should come late. I'm saying you should come on time. But the people who do come late are good workers. That's
Totally.
it.
Yeah, this presentation is not an excuse for being late. That was not what this presentation is supposed to be about. It's just lateness is the most obvious symptom of time blindness. Yeah, I think anyone else before I go?
Yeah, I was gonna. Go ahead.
Go
You want
ahead,
me to go
go ahead.
first?
Oh.
Huh? No, you got it.
Okay. So I personally believe, like, if you're being transparent with your employer, letting them know you have this disability or trait, they should be able to accommodate you, and you know, in any shape or form. So if you need, you know, extra time getting to work because of the situation or things of that nature, just be transparent, because I feel like no one should be like stressed out. That's like an added stress. So that's just making it even worse to your procrastination. So I just think if you're transparent, you know, and then also a lot of these different new, you know, issues that's arising now weren't explored back then. So it may seem different for the older generations, but these are things that were not explored. You know, it was kind of swept under the rug. So I think it's good to be open-minded and just kind of meet people where they are.
Totally. Bintu?
I was gonna say that so I was kind of like thinking about what Tahani had said, with, you know, you could be a good worker, but you do show up late. And I think with that, like, a person should be mindful if they notice that they have this trait of time blind, because you could be a great worker and phenomenal at your job, but if you're late all the time, it kind of overshadows your work. So that's why I think that a person should, if they are aware that there's something that's a struggle for them, then to take that, like maybe a calendar or some type of way to, like, 'cause I know for me, like, I like to, like, be very scheduled out. So I think that someone who has like issues with time blindness, like, they could benefit from like a schedule, from alarms, like multiple alarms. You see my alarms, I'm stacked up. So I think someone could benefit from something like that.
Yeah, I agree with all of you for sure. Jasmine said something interesting. You know, she said, you know, these things weren't explored, you know, back in the day, right? A big thing that we hear a lot is, oh my God, everyone has autism now. The rate of autism is so much higher now. It's like, well, people weren't getting diagnosed as much. People had autism back then. They just were not getting diagnosed as often as they are now because people are more aware, right? And with time blindness in itself, you know, everyone loves to label things, time blindness, lateness, whatever you want to call it. The reality of it is that it does happen. Again, that is not an excuse to be late to your job and not do your job properly and miss deadlines and stuff. You know, everyone misses things sometimes. We're all human, but when it becomes chronic, that's when it really needs to be addressed, right? So, for example, with me, like I knew I had a chronic lateness issue, and I knew that when I got into the real world, that would not be accepted. So I had to figure it out. And like I said before, figuring it out just might be harder for some people, right? It might take more for some people than others, and that's okay. And we'll get into that. This is just highlighting that one comment that I read before. The person that is always late is usually the best worker. I think time blindness is a real thing, and that people, real thing that people deal with. And so we need to take accommodations. That's kind of what Jasmine said, and kind of all of you said, right? You know, someone shouldn't be 30 minutes late every single day, but if they're a good worker, they're a good worker, you know, and it really depends on the employer these days, of course. So treatments, there are a bunch of treatments that you can do for anything like this, any kind of time management issue or just management issue in general, right? So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, can always help with time management skills. You know, this is kind of just improving your awareness for your time blindness, right? If you work with a professional and kind of say, you know, I have this chronic lateness issue, what can I do to help? They can kind of help you with that. ADHD medication was something I was going to mention before. I mean, this is really quite a magical thing that they have these days with Focalin and Adderall and Vyvanse and things like that. It's very, very effective at treating ADHD, and it can really help with symptoms and the dopamine regulation, right? So when you take these medications, they can really help your brain kind of straighten out. Some people like them, some people don't, but they are definitely helpful. And then therapy, right? So getting guidance from a professional, right? That's always a good option for any kind of mental health issue or just mental issue in general, right? So people specialize in time management, and they can give you these tools to help you, right? And here are some of the tools that we have, right? And we kind of mentioned some of these before, right? So using timers and alarms, so setting alarms, timers on your phone, on a clock, reminds you of specific tasks, right? For me specifically, it's clocking in and out. I have an alarm for clocking in and an alarm for clocking out, an alarm for lunch that may go off, you know what I mean, soon. But, you know, alarms for everything. Sometimes when I have an appointment or something, I set an alarm for 2 hours before to remind me, hey, you have an appointment in 2 hours, right? Create visual schedules. This is a big one, especially for people with ADHD who are very visual people. These visual schedules, color-coded schedules, to-do lists, with clear time blocks with different colors, really help you visualize your day and stay on track with your day. Listing to-dos and crossing them off too is very helpful, at least for me specifically, and I think others with ADHD, because it almost feels like an accomplishment when you finish something on your to-do list. Physically checking it off is so satisfying, right? When I was in college, when I was getting my master's degree, I did that for everything. Every assignment I had for the whole semester, it would just take me a day or two to get everything lined up for the whole semester so that I could at least follow it. And even if I'm not consistent with it, at least I have it from when I wrote it down before, right? And I would check off everything I would do until the end of the semester, and it was such a good feeling. Break things into smaller steps, right? So if you have one big task that you just kind of want to bang out of the way, if that works for you, that works for you. But if it doesn't, break it into smaller steps, right? More manageable things with specific time frames can definitely help you stay focused and track progress. Time management apps. I don't personally have any time management apps, but I have heard of some really good ones. They're basically a tool that helps people with ADHD or just people with time perception challenges to remind them of tasks. So, you know, it's like reminders, task lists, whatever. I don't really think an app is necessary anymore. The iPhones have everything you need. They have a reminder app, and now like something I've done is on my home screen, I have right here, like anything that I have that day is just right on my home screen. So there's no way I could forget it. I open my phone and it's right there. Today says no events today, but when I do have an event, it'll pop up there, right? Routines are very, very difficult for people with ADHD. They tend to struggle to make routines, but putting in the extra mental effort in creating and establishing a daily routine and trying to stick to it as close as possible can really help with consistency and regulate your internal sense of time. That includes when you wake up, when you eat breakfast. Like, I eat breakfast at the same time every day. I eat lunch at the same time every day. I eat dinner at the same time every day. I try to go to bed at the same time every day, because if I fall off of that, I know my whole life is going to be a domino effect and everything's going to fall off, right? Mindfulness, right? So like I said, people with these issues may just have to be extra mindful. Everyone should practice mindfulness, but extra mindfulness, especially in time blindness, is very, very helpful, right? So staying mindful into the time and how much you're reading, how much you're watching, you know, how long you're watching, even setting a timer for that. Okay, I'm gonna watch this until my timer goes off, right? And not snoozing it, you know what I mean? Actually following it can really help you reduce that feeling of time slipping away, right? Be aware of time-consuming activities. I talked about this before, right? TikTok, Instagram, anything on the phone, YouTube, reading sometimes, right? Those things are very time-consuming because of that dopamine level that it grabs from you, right? And you just don't even realize how long you're scrolling, right? There's plenty of times where I'm scrolling through TikTok and I look up and it's literally 2 a.m. and I'm like, how did that even happen? Like, literally, how did that happen? Right? So just be aware of that. The iPhone now has a timer you can put on your apps, right? And it'll have a pop-up say, okay, it's time for you to get off the app. You are only allotted 2 hours today, and you use your 2 hours and that's it, right? Those things can be very helpful as well. And the last but not least is not to get discouraged. It is inevitable that you will fall off your schedule. It's inevitable that something will get in the way. It's inevitable that something will knock you out of your consistency, right? When you do use these tips and tricks. Not getting discouraged, I think, is the most important part, you know, saying, okay, you know what? I messed up today. I was late today. I scrolled a little too long today. There's always tomorrow, and I'm going to continue to try my best tomorrow, right? Getting discouraged and just giving in to all those things and the lateness and the TikTok and the Instagram, you know, that is never going to help you, right? And that's all I have. I have a feedback form here, and our website is here as well. Does anyone have any final thoughts or comments, concerns? Then that's it for me. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you, Julia. That was a wonderful presentation. It was very
Thanks.
informative. And it's especially on a topic that I think a lot of people don't know about. So I think everyone will come off with a little bit of information and maybe give a little grace and patience for individuals that they might find who in their lives who have that kind of condition. So thank you again, Julia. I want to thank everyone for joining us on this webinar. I'm hoping that you'll come on next Monday, when Jency Solomon, another prevention consultant, will be talking about idleness in her lazy days, hazy ways, the summer's idle. This is especially geared towards caregivers and parents on how to make the youth in their lives productive and the benefits of being active in the summertime. But I want to thank you all for joining us. Please, I'm going to put in the chat a link so that you can provide feedback. And I hope that you follow us on our social media. As you can tell that Julia had put our QR code for our website. We're also on Instagram. We're on Facebook. So please follow us on our events out in the community, and we'll be hitting the ground soon in the schools, and you'll see our lovely faces of our prevention consultants. So thank you again, and you guys enjoy your week.